let's bring him in. Dave Hall. A big theme of today's show, Dave, is going to be about Canucks prospects. So we thought, who better than the man wearing a Seattle Mariners hat, like I usually am on this show, very nice, to come in and talk prospects with us. Dave Hall, the Canucks Army prospect guru. How are you?
Doing great. It's a beautiful Monday afternoon. How could you not be?
We even today, folks.
I will say that
is.
you know that David and I are both we have to be diehard Mariners fans, as they're quite literally maybe the worst organization out there. My entire life, they've made the playoffs 4 times, so you know that we've got to be fans.
Hey, first in the AL West this year, they're turning things around.
It's our time.
It's our time. It's our time. Okay, Dave. The topic of our poll question, I saw you commenting on this on Twitter as well, was just flat out, which Canucks prospect has the best chance at cracking the NHL roster? And we added a follow-up that I meant to write out of camp here. Max Sasson, Jonathan Lekermaki, or Aatu Raty. And then we also gave the option for people to write in. Your thoughts?
Well, and I will get to those 3, but if I can, I will add 2 others. And the first one, just right off the bat, and you can consider him a prospect or not, with over 125 games under his belt now, but my obvious answer is Vasily Podkolzin. I just think, he's kind of in that mix of prospect, not prospect. Played a couple games in Abbotsford last year. I just think at this point, it's always just been, I hope he carves out a permanent role. I hope he does well this year. I think we're past that I hope stage. And for me, I think we're at the point where he must, earn that spot. He must maintain that fountain, like that serviceable role, whether it's in the bottom 6, that's fine. I just think this is the big year for him. So for me, that's the obvious answer. We can't have Podkolzin in Abbotsford. That's just a no-go. And then number 2 is Arshdeep Bains. Just the difference, I know that he's a little bit older, but the difference that he had from year 1 to year 2 was just incredible. And whether it was from an offensive standpoint, a leadership role, or just a straight up driver, he was the golden child in Abbotsford. And I think he has warrant and probably will come back in training camp, knocking on the door. This goes all the way back to the Western League, but you can see that in every single one of his leaps, he's never really came out the gate super strong. He's always taken some time to kind of learn the league, figure it out, and then comes back the next year and comes out gangbusters. So now he's, in the last couple games, we could kind of tell that he was probably a little bit above his head, and he should probably go back to Abbotsford. But now that he's gained the reps, he's seen what it needs to happen. He knows the speed, he knows the physicality. I do personally think that he comes back after a good summer in training camp and ultimately earns a spot on this roster. Now, to go with the 3 that we talked, or that were in the poll, my answer was Max Sasson, and there's a few reasons for that. And I think if you've been following me for a while now, you're probably not super shocked on me choosing Sasson. I've been quite vocal on him wanting a spot, and I get why he wasn't. It was kind of just, a sign of the times. They were heading for the playoffs. At that point, you're trying to work out the kinks. You don't want to just bring in Sasson for whatever reason. If this was the year before, however, I do think we see Sasson in the lineup at some point. I just think ultimately, first things first is that he's probably at this point, as much as you might not like it, he probably is our best center prospect. So even when he moves up, he's going to play center. He plays the role well. He's always the fastest player on the ice. So even Arshdeep Bains is fast in the AHL, but Max Sasson has that ability. I believe he's going to be fast in the NHL. So his skating's ready. He works every single shift. He plays one of those talk-it types where he just doesn't give up, and he gets into the dirty areas and he'll drive play. So for me, it's probably just a 4th line role, and that's probably where he might cap out, maybe 3rd line center. But I think as a cheaper option, I do think he is probably the best option to go up, simply for the fact that he will maintain a center role. Looking at Lekermaki, I think obviously he's the golden child. He's the one that we all want, and that we all expect him to go. But for me, I think it's important to really tread lightly here. At this point, he does sort of represent, at least in the forward group, our quote unquote must hit prospect, right? Like he's our only homegrown, high pedigree, high draft pick prospect that we sort of need to make sure that hits. If he can hit, he's a huge addition. So I do think it's important that we kind of tread lightly with his confidence and his development. And so for me, maybe he comes in, he goes to Penticton and the Young Stars, has an unbelievable showcase, comes into camp super confident, scores a couple goals, and he makes the spot. That's great. I think everyone's all for that. But for me, unless he's coming in to play a top six role next to Elias Pettersson, where he's gonna, be put in a spot to score goals, shoot as much as he wants, then that's great. And yes, let's do it. But at the same time, if he's not, let's get him down to Abbotsford playing top six, top power play, shooting a ton, and just seeing where it goes. And then we can look back at it at Christmas. For me, I'm just a little worried. Although we all want it, I just don't see the need to really put him in there unless he commands the spot, which could happen. I'm not sold on it right now.
Yeah, that's a great take on the Karamaki situation, especially because being one of the later birthdays from the 2022 draft class, he is one of the youngest players of his draft class. He's still only 19. He hasn't even turned 20 years old yet. Now, as for Arshdeep Bains, I'm curious, what's your confidence level that he can develop into something more than just a replacement level depth piece? Like, is there a scenario where maybe it doesn't happen right away, but over time that he can be, let's say, a decent third line forward, or is his ceiling just a kind of run of the mill depth player?
Yeah, I think that's probably likely, but I do think there is something there for a third line center. He has shown like he's got great offensive ability. His vision is incredible. Sometimes, in the AHL it works. Maybe it doesn't always work at the NHL level. He does a lot of spin, like quick, behind the back plays. He's crafty, so he does have that offensive pedigree, and he is fast. I think once he comes back and he's worked on the stuff that he's now learned from his 6-game stint in the NHL, I think there is a spot to be had on the third line. But it is going to be one of those things. It's just if he can get that extra speed and use that vision that maybe isn't just so, I don't know what the word I want to use is, but just sometimes he gets a little reckless with his passes, which always work out in the AHL, but we'll see if they can work out in the NHL.
Dave, what can we expect from Tom Willander next season?
Well, I think the nice thing is Lane Hutson's going to be gone. And so for me, I think it's going to be a really nice year that he's going to be the guy to top line, whether it's even strength or power play. I think the power play is going to be the big thing because obviously we love his defense. We love his work ethic. We love all that stuff on the defensive end. Still some things to work out, but what really needs to pop is that offensive pedigree. And obviously the numbers this year were, quite pedestrian. So from anyone that isn't watching the games, it's hard to tell whether he's playing good or not because his numbers don't look that great. But he was also, his average was like 30 seconds on the power play. So I think him just getting an extra little push offensively, and not only offensively, but just as the guy in Boston, I think that's going to be a big tell towards what his game is really going to truly look like. And so who knows what happens. I just think it's going to be a big year for him just as the man in Boston. So
it seemed like Raty really caught fire down the stretch in Abbotsford. It also feels like he's been more successful on the wing than at center. Do you look at him as a dark horse in that maybe if he has a big summer, he at some point next season could be an impact player for this Canucks team? And maybe not next season, but just big picture, when you look at Raty as a prospect, what do you think his realistic ceiling is?
Well, right off the bat, for me, for the realistic ceiling, it's probably on the wing. I just, like he's a good centerman in the sense that he's good at faceoffs and he's good at the actual positioning of a centerman. I just don't know. The problem with Raty this year, and he had a really good year, don't get me wrong, the development was great. He's worked on a lot of game. He upped all of his numbers. It's fantastic. But there's also an element of he's a little bit inconsistent. Like there are moments where you get 14 points in 7 games. That's great. It's so, it's great to see. But then 12 games before that, there were games where you don't even notice him. And then 10 games after that, there were games that you don't notice him. So they kind of come in spurts. And even when he was getting the points, my issue was that there wasn't a lot of, in my opinion, play driving. Like it was typically him being on the wing with Max Sasson in the center, going into the corners, grabbing it, and Raty getting the secondary assist. More than almost 3/4 of his points were secondary assists last year. So, while we do like the development. And don't get me wrong, it was a great year, and I'm really excited to see what he has this year. I'm personally sort of in the same boat as Lekaramaki, where even if he has a good camp and shows some good stuff next year, I still would like to see him back in Abbotsford, which is probably going to happen regardless. But I would like to see him back and basically just do it again. Let's see if you can actually maintain that top six role and actually start driving play, because that was the one thing for me that I didn't see a lot of, was just his ability to drive play. And I just think the skating has improved big time, and hopefully it'll improve even more this summer, but it still just wasn't quite up to par for where I feel comfortable that he's a centerman at the NHL level. So for me,
yeah.
Oh, balloons.
I don't know what. Did you see that?
Yeah, I saw that.
I don't know how that happened. Sorry.
That was awesome. No, that's awesome. Yeah, so basically, like I do think he's got pedigree to be that middle six winger. He's got some interesting qualities. For me, it's on the wing.
I don't know how I got those balloons to go, but if it was in the podcast, a bunch of balloons popped up. I know I can do the thumbs up and get a thumbs up to pop up. I don't know how it all works, but anyways, the thing that I was going to say, though, it feels like those two, Ratu and Lekaramaki, might be able to actually play together. Maybe be the guys together. Dave, is there any other prospect that maybe we're not talking about enough and that Canucks fans should have their eye on? Hey, and if they want to have their eye on it, you're going to be at Dev Camp. You're going to be doing Blackfish all year long, like you always do over at Canucks Army. That's where you find all the good prospect updates and the bad ones.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, with all this talk about the forwards, there's not too much going on the defensive side. The one thing I like about their defense is AHL wise, I think Abbotsford's going to have a really fun back end. Now, as of this year, there's going to be a nice mix of veteran and young blood in there, so that's going to be fun. I think Elias Pettersson, or DPD, if you will, is probably someone to keep an eye on. I was a little upset that we didn't see him down the stretch in the playoffs, and I can kind of see where Colleton was coming from. He doesn't have a lot of experience, and they wanted to play their more veteran guys in order to push past that round. But at the same time, I was really hoping to see Pettersson in the playoffs, as that's pretty much what his game is. And so he's definitely a name that I would keep an eye out. Another name that I am intrigued with, and I just want to see what he can do, is Josh Bloom. Obviously, you guys had him on last week. He's a great kid. He did try it out, just he struggled to get minutes. But I will say, and I think I even sent a message to you in his first game, that wow, Josh Bloom, in his first game in the AHL, he stuck out to me. Like he's always working, his feet are always moving, and I just think, sometimes we look at a 20-year-old and we think, oh, some people call him a bust, but he's only 20 years old. Like we bring in NCAA prospects that are 22, 23, and we're hoping that they work out. But then, when a 20-year-old can't make the pro team, it's, the end of the world. So I'm really interested to see what he does this year. And while I don't think he probably won't be like an offensive huge guy at the AHL, I am curious to see how he makes out in the middle six here in Abbotsford.
With Sawyer Minyo, it feels like he's a name that maybe doesn't get a lot of attention in this market. He was a third-round pick, I believe, in 2023. In his draft year, felt like he was on a stacked WHL team, didn't have as much opportunity. Some of their players moved on, graduated. Minyo took on a bit more of a bigger role on that blue line in the top four, more offensive opportunities. Point total sort of exploded, although he is still more of a defensive defenseman type. Mm-hmm. What did you see from his development this season, and what are your just overall thoughts on him as a prospect?
Yeah, to be honest, he was probably out of all the prospects this year, he was probably the most surprising to me. I had seen his game, and like you said, he was put under like a really stacked Seattle team that went to the finals, and they were really good. So he was playing a sheltered role. And one thing that stood out for me this year, I really like his skating, I like his two-way ability, but his shot, I did not see that shot before he was drafted. To be honest, his release is incredible. He's got, whether it's a one-timer or just a clapper from the point, he's just got a really nice shot. So I think that was the biggest thing that struck out for me. But kind of like Willander, I'm excited to see him this year too, because Seattle will have even more players going up. Jeremy Hansel, who was typically the number one guy right before Sawyer Minyo in Seattle, he's going to be gone as well. So now this year, even more so, Sawyer Minyo is going to take on even more minutes. So I was just overall impressed with his offensive game. So as you alluded to, he's more of a defensive style, penalty killing defenseman, which is great. He's super aggressive. But for me, it was just that offense. I did not expect to see him put up the kind of goals he was putting up. He's basically their Elias Pettersson shooter on the left flank there. His one-timer is that good at the junior level. So that was for me the big thing. And yeah, in my opinion, he was this year's unsung prospect, which I didn't really see coming. He was kind of it's a good ode to the scouting staff, because I think when he was drafted in the third round, I think there were a lot of question marks about what they saw in this kid, that in the third round, maybe if it was in the fifth, sixth, or seventh, you could justify it. But I think him getting taken in the third round was a bit of a head scratcher for a lot of people. And so I think it's a nice justification for the scouting staff, and something that they saw in him a little beyond what some other people might have saw.
Dave, good stuff as always. We really appreciate it. People can find you over at Canucks Army. Thanks for doing this, man. Appreciate it.
No problem. Go Mariners.
There he is. Go Mariners. Dave Hall. Our thanks again to Dave Hall.